Good morning. Wednesday, August 5th, 2020, another video. I'm a big baseball fan, and I like to analyze baseball stats. This video will zero in on metrics. What do I mean? Let's dig deeper to see how valuable a baseball player is. And where does he rank as far as the best of all time? This fascinates me. Baseball is a unique game. You have the battle between the batter and the pitcher. Who wins the battle? Well, we know that if you can bat over 300, that means 3 hits out of 10 at bats, you're good. If you can do 4 hits out of 10 at bats, you bat 400, you're very, very good. But how about over your entire career? How good of a baseball player are you? Where do your stats rank? Well, I did some research, kind of a little hobby of mine. Who has the most at bats in Major League history over 150 years of baseball? Pete Rose, 14,053 at bats. And we know he accumulated 4,256 hits. So I did an analysis on Pete Rose. He played 3,562 games and accumulated 4,256 hits. That's more than a hit a game. Actually, it comes out to 1.19 hits per game. Played 24 years. So he's number one with 4,256 hits. You know what I asked myself? I said, what if some of the other Hall of Fame players played the exact number of games that Pete Rose had? Pete Rose had 3,562 games. What if everybody else played the same amount of games? How many hits would they have ended up with? Now, I'm talking not just any person. I'm talking about the good players who had high averages over their career. How many hits would they have ended up with? Now, baseball is different because you get walks or you get hit by the pitch or a sacrifice fly. That's not credited with an at-bat. So it's hard to determine, for example, if Pete Rose and Ty Cobb had the same amount of bats, how many hits would they have both ended up with? So it's hard to determine because you've got the walk, the hit by the pitch, and the sacrifice fly. Here's what I'm going to do with metric. I'm going to say, how many games did Ty Cobb play, and how many hits did he end up with? He played 3,034 games and ended up with 4,189 hits. Pete Rose had 528 more games. And as a result, he has 75 more hits than Pete Rose. Than Ty Cobb. Are you following me? What I'm saying is, since Pete Rose played 528 more games, he's number one in hits. But what if Ty Cobb played 528 more games? How many hits would he have ended up with? Well, I divided the games. He played 3,034 games, divided it by the hits he accumulated. We know that he had 4,189 hits in 3,034 games. So that comes out to 1.38 hits per game. Multiply the 1.38 by an extra 528 games so that he has the same amount of games as Pete Rose. Following me? I'll say it again slow. Pete Rose played 3,562 games. Ty Cobb played 3,034 games. That means Pete Rose played 528 more games than Ty Cobb. Pete ended up with 4,256 hits, but we know there were walks and hit by the pitch and sacrifice fly. Ty Cobb played 3,034 games, ended up with 4,189 hits, but he also had walks, hit by the pitch, sacrifices, sacrifice fly. So what's the best way to determine how many hits Ty Cobb would have ended up with if he played 528 more games? Well, we know that he averaged 1.38 hits per game. Multiply that by 528 extra games so that he has the same amount of games as Pete Rose. 528 times 1.38 hits per game is an extra 729 hits. So add the 729 to his already total of 4,189, and Ty Cobb ends up with 4,918 hits. According to my calculation, nobody else in Major League history would have that many hits in the same amount of games that the number one person, Pete Rose, played. Follow me? If every player played the same amount of games as Pete Rose, 3,562, how many hits would they have ended up with? Okay? Pete has 4,256 hits. Ty Cobb, same amount of games, 4,918. Wow. How about Roger Hornsby? He played 2,259 games. Add 1,303 games. Then he'll have 3,562, the same as Pete Rose. How many hits would he have ended up with? Well, what we do is we divide the amount of hits that he had, 2,930, and the amount of games that he played, 2,259. So that comes out to 1.29 hits per game. So for Roger Hornsby, if he plays 3,562 games, multiply that by 1.29, that gives him an extra 1,681 hits. Add that to the 2,930 that he has, and he ends up with 4,611. Same amount of games as Rose and Cobb, 3,562. That's the magic number we're going to follow. See where I'm getting at? All three players play the same amount of games. Pete averaged 1.19 hits per game, but Cobb had a higher 1.38 hits per game. Hornsby, 1.29 hits per game, according to his average. Okay? Let's take Henry Aaron. Well, he played a lot of games, 3,298, so he only needs 264 more games to equal the same amount of games as Pete Rose, is 3,562. So if you divide the hits, the amount, he had 3,771 in his career, divide that by the games he played, he comes out at 1.24 hits per game. So multiply that by an extra 264 games he needs to match the same amount of games that Pete Rose played. That's 328 more hits. He ends up with 4,099. So he's short of Pete Rose. Pete had 4,256. Aaron, same amount of games. He ends up at 4,099. You know why? I think Aaron had a lot of walks and sacrifice flies. That takes away. All right. How about Ted Williams? Divide the hits by the amount of games he played. Played 2,292. Comes out to, and he had 2,654 hits. So he comes out 1.16 hits per game, a little lower. So add the games he needs to equal how many Pete Rose played, multiply it by the 1.16. He comes out an extra 1,474 hits, will be added to his total. He ends up with 4,128 hits. If he plays the same amount of games as Aaron, Hornsby, Cobb, and Rose. So he's still short of Rose. Number one is Cobb, 49-18 as far as hits. Two, the second person I found was Hornsby. He would be 46-11. Aaron falls short, 4,099. Williams beats Aaron. How about the Babe? Well, we know he played in 2,503 games, but had 2,873 hits. So in order for him to get the same amount of games as Pete, we need to add another 1,000 games. But he only comes out to 1.14 hits per game. He had a lot of walks. In fact, I think Babe Ruth had the most walks in Major League history, 2,062. Sacrifice flies, hit by the pitch. So it's hard to determine where Ruth ends up. But I did the dividing. Divide the hits by the games he played. He comes out at 1.14. So you multiply the extra 1,000 games to reach what Pete Rose played. That gives him an extra 1,200 hits. Add that to the total that he had, 2,873. He comes out at 4,074 hits, short of Rose and short of Aaron. Interesting on Ruth. His average of hits per game. How about Gehrig? Gehrig comes out a little bit better. Lou Gehrig played in only 2,164 games, but he had 2,700 hits. Divide it, he comes out 1.24 hits per game. Add the amount of games he needs. He'll get an extra 1,700 hits. Add that to the total that he has. He comes out at 4,455 hits. So according to my analysis, Lou Gehrig comes in ahead of Ruth, Ted Williams, Henry Aaron. But he's below Hornsby and Cobb. Got some other players. You remember a player called Shoeless Joe Jackson? Lifetime batting average 356, but he got banned by baseball after 12 years for betting on the World Series. So we don't know where he ends up, but according to the trajectory that he was on, played 1,300 games and had over 1,700 hits. So he's at 1.33 hits per game. He only played 1,300 games. So you got to add another 2,200 games to match what Pete Rose played. Multiply it by 1.33 hits per game. He comes out, if he plays the same amount of games as Pete Rose, all the factors, he comes out with 4,738 hits. I've got that number 2. Ahead of Hornsby and ahead of Cobb. How about that? But we don't know about Shoeless Joe Jackson because he got banned from baseball. So a little skeptical there. How about Tris Speaker? 2,700 games, 3,500 hits. Add the games, he comes out 1.26 hits per game. Add what he gets, he comes out 4,488. According to my list, that puts him number 3. Nope. No, number 4. Stan Musial played a lot of games, a lot of hits. Comes out 1.19 hits per game. 4,268. 1.19 hits per game. Willie Mays, 1.09 hits per game. Comes out 3,500 hits total. And then Yastrzemski, 1.03 hits per game. How about another guy on the list? You'd have to consider Honus Wagner with 8 batting titles. Where would he end up? According to my analysis, he would end up around 4,000, because I'm not going to be so detailed on every one of them. And Tony Gwynn would be another one. He would end up around 4,000. But who are the players that average the most hits per games? And you take that magic number of 3,562 games that Pete Rose played. So who's the order? Ty Cobb, 4,918 hits. And then you know who would be second? With Shoeless Joe Jackson, 4,738 hits in 3,562 games. Who's number 3? You got to go with Roger Hornsby. 4, Tris Speaker. 5, Luke Gehrig. Okay. 6, Stan Musial. And then you'd go with Wagner and then Gwynn. Then you would get into Henry Aaron, Ted Williams, Babe Ruth, and then Willie Mays and Carl Yastrzemski last. What do you think of that analysis? Who's the best hitter of all time? Ty Cobb. Now, a lot of people, they don't put him number 1 on their list as far as the greatest baseball player of all time. They put Babe Ruth. And I do too. I put Babe Ruth the best because he only had 8,000 at-bats and had over 2,800 hits because he had 2,000 walks and he has over 700 home runs and over 2,000 RBIs, and the Babe did it all. See, the problem with Cobb was he didn't hit the home run, but he did have over 4,000 hits, and he had the highest batting average, 366. He had 1,900 RBIs. But you're going to go more with the power and the RBIs. Ruth had a 342 lifetime batting average, but Cobb beats him at 366. So who's the best hitter of all time? Here's how I do it. Babe Ruth is the best home run hitter of all time because his ratio, 8,000 at-bats, and he hit 7,000 home runs. 700 home runs. Where Aaron, how many at-bats did he have? 12,000 at-bats. He had 4,000 more at-bats, yet he ends up with 755. Ruth had 8,300 at-bats and ends up with 714. Aaron had 4,000 more at-bats, yet only 50 more home runs. See where I'm getting at there? You got to put Babe Ruth as the best home run hitter of all time, ratio. Because if Babe plays another 4,000 at-bats, and every 11 at-bats, how many more home runs would he have hit? Over 1,000. So you see there. But as far as the best hitter of all time, according to the metric and the analysis, if Ty Cobb plays 3,562 games, he has 4,918 total hits for his career, according to that analysis, okay? All right, I'm done with the metric as far as how the best hitter of all time. How about this analysis? This is called metric. How about we take hits, runs, and RBIs, the total for a player in those categories, and add them up as one number to get a total. For example, 1 hit plus 1 run plus 1 RBI equals 3 total. Well, I've got a list of 50 players for their career, and guess what I found out? Guess what I found out? 50 players in these 3 categories are listed as far as total and who's number 1. All right, follow me along here. Number 50, Ernie Banks. I'm going to count down from 50 to number 1. Add up their hits, runs, and RBIs for their career as one number. Okay? Hits, they hit home runs, doubles, and triples, but that counts as a hit. Single, double, triple, home run counts as a hit in that category. Runs scored. Okay? And then the RBIs they had for the season. Those 3 categories, add them up as a total number. Ernie Banks, number 50. I'm going to round off on a lot of this, okay? Over 2,500 hits, over 1,300 runs scored, and over 1,600 RBIs. He comes up with a total of 5524. I'll cross them off as I do it, okay? That's Ernie Banks, number 50 on the list. 5,524. What number is the number 1 person as far as adding up the 3 categories? And who's number 1? Stay tuned. Number 49 on the list, Lou Brock. Over 3,000 hits, over 1,600 runs scored, but a little low on the RBIs, 900. But he comes in at 5533, better than Banks, 49 on the list. Wade Boggs. 48, over 3,000 hits, 1,500 runs scored, over 1,000 RBIs, so that puts him at 5537. By all the numbers. 47, Johnny Damon. Over 2,700 hits, over 1,600 runs scored, and over 1,100 RBIs, puts him at 5576. Okay, Damon. 46 on the list. Sam Rice. Over 2,900 hits, over 1,500 runs, and over 1,000 RBIs, 5578. Beats Boggs by 2. 45, Billy Williams. Over 2,700 hits, over 1,400 runs, and over 1,400 RBIs, puts him at 5596. Mickey Mantle, 44 on the list. Over 2,400 hits, over 1,600 runs scored, and over 1,500 RBIs, puts him at even 5,600 total. Jim Thome, over 2,300 hits, over 1,500 runs scored, close to 1,700 RBIs, 5610. 42, Frank Thomas. Over 2,400 hits, over 1,400 runs scored, over 1,700 RBIs, 5621. I'm rounding off on the numbers, but the total is accurate, okay? Tony Perez, over 2,700 hits, over 1,200 runs scored, over 1,600 RBIs, 5656. Frankie Frisch, haven't heard of him that much. Over 2,800 hits, over 1,500 runs scored, over 1,200 RBIs, 5656. He ties Tony Perez, exactly. Wow. Tony Gwynn comes on the list at number 39. Over 3,100 hits, over 1,300 runs scored, over 1,100 RBIs, 5662. But he's 39 on the list. Roberto Clemente, 37. Am I following right here? Let's see. 50, 49, 48, 47, 46, 45, 44, 43, 42, 41, 40, 39. Clemente would be 38. Roberto Clemente, 38. 3,000 hits, over 1,400 runs, over 1,300 RBIs, 5721. 37. Andre Dawson. Over 2,700 hits, over 1,300 runs, and over close to 1,600 RBIs, 5738. 37. 36. Harold Baines. Over 2,800 hits, over close to 1,300 runs, and over 1,600 RBIs, 5793. Okay. 35. Reggie Jackson. What a player. Over 2,500 hits, over 1,500 runs, and over 1,700 RBIs. 5837. Okay. 50, 49, 48, 47, 46, 45, 44, 43, 42, 41, 40, 39, 38, 37, 36, 35, 34 on the list. Sam Crawford. Over 2,900 hits, over 1,300 runs, close to 1,400 there, and over 1,500 RBIs, 5875. Okay. Chipper Jones, 33. Chipper Jones. Wow. Over 2,700 hits, over 1,600 runs, and over 1,600 RBIs, puts him at 5968. Okay. Joe Gehringer, over 2,800 hits, over 1,700 runs, over 1,400 RBIs. He breaks 6,041. First one in the 6,000. I started off with 5492. Now I'm at 6,041. Okay. Okay. I want to make sure I've got the right numbers. Craig Biggio, for 3,000 hits, over 1,800 runs, and over 1,100 RBIs, 6,074. Just want to make sure I'm counting down correctly, okay? Ernie Banks, Brock Boggs, Damon Rice, Billy Williams, Mickey Mantle, Tommy, Thomas, Perez, Frisch, Gwynn, Clemente, Dawson, Baines, Jackson, Crawford, Jones, Gehringer, Biggio, Paul Waner. Over 3,100 hits, 1,600 runs scored, over 1,300 RBIs, 6,088. Roger Hornsby comes in high. 2,900 hits, 1,500 runs scored, 1,500 RBIs, 6,093. Jake Beckley, over 2,900 hits, 1,600 runs scored, 1,500 RBIs, 6,122. And Robin Yount, okay, over 3,100 hits, 1,600 runs scored, 1,400 RBIs, 6,180. All right. How about that? 50, 49, 48, 47, 46, 45, 44, 43, 42, 41, 40, 39, 38, 37, 36, 35, 34, 33, 32, 31, 30, 29, 28, 27. Now 26 on the list. Al Kaline, how about this? 3,000 hits, 1,600 runs, over 1,500 RBIs, 6211. And where is he listed? 25 on the list. 26 on the list. My apology, when I count down, I want to get the right number, all right? Al Kaline, 26 on the list. 25. Yeah, here I am. Al Simmons, over 2,900 hits, over 1,500 runs scored, over 1,800 RBIs, 62-61. 26, 25, 20. Okay. Ken Griffey Jr., 24 on the list. 24, 3, 2, 1, 20, 19, 18. So yeah, okay. 24 on the list is Ken Griffey. I did all these numbers in my head, but I'll get to number 1. Over 2,700 hits for Griffey, over 1,600 runs, and over 1,800 RBIs gives him 62.79. 24, 23. Ted Williams comes in number 23 on the list. Wow. 2,600 hits, almost 1,800 runs scored, and over 1,800 RBIs. 62.91, but who beats him? Jimmy Fox. 22 on the list. For 2,600 hits, over 1,700 runs, close to over 1,900 RBIs, pushed him at 63.19. 21 on the list, George Brett. 3,100 hits, 1,500 runs scored, and over close to 1,600 RBIs, 63.33. 20 on the list, Nap Lajoie. Over 3,200 hits, over 1,500 runs, and close to 1,600 RBIs, 63.45. 19. Okay, 19. Paul Molitor. Over 3,300 hits, over 1,700 runs, and over 1,300 RBIs, 64.08. 18 on the list, Andre Beltre. 3,100 hits, over 1,500 runs, and over 1,700 RBIs, 63.97. All right, I've got my list correct now. I want to be careful. Counting down, that was number 18. 17. Eddie Collins, over 3,300 hits, over 1,800 runs, and on close to 1,300 RBIs, 64.35. Eddie Collins. 16 on the list. Wait till you see who's number 1. You may be surprised. Okay, got that. 16. Rickey Henderson. Over 3,000 hits, over 2,295 runs scored. I think that's number 1. A little low on the RBIs, over 1,100 RBIs, but that pushes him at 64.65. 15. Cal Ripken Jr. Over 3,100 hits, over 1,600 runs, and close to 1,700 RBIs. Really good in all three. 65.26. Cal Ripken. Who beats him? 14. Frank Robinson. 2,900 hits, over 1,800 runs scored, and over 1,800 RBI. 65.84. Number 14 on the list. 13. This is incredible, these players. Mel Ott. Over 2,800 hits, over 1,800 runs scored, and over 1,800 RBIs, pushes him at 65.95. 12. Lou Gehrig. Over 2,700 hits, over 1,800 runs scored, and close to 2,000 RBIs. 66.04 for Lou Gehrig, but he's at number 12. Who's number 11? Dave Winfield. Over 3,100 hits, over 1,600 RBI runs scored, and over 1,800 RBIs. 66.12. That was number 11, and here's the top 10. All right, where am I at? I'm at 6612 total for the category. I started off at 5524. So you see where I'm at? 6612. Who's number 10? Derek Jeter. Over 3,400 hits, over 1,900 runs scored, and over 1,300 RBIs. That gives him 66.99. Number 9, Eddie Murray. Over 3,200 hits, over 1,600 runs scored, and over 1,900 RBIs. 67.99. That's number 9. Who's number 8? Tris Speaker. Over 3,500 hits, over 1,800 runs scored, and over 1,500 RBIs. 69.25. 7, Carl Yastrzemski. Over 3,400 hits, over 1,800 runs scored, and over 1,800 RBIs. Very good in all three. And he breaks 7,079 total. I told you the first number was 5524, and that was number 50 on the list. We are at number 7, and yet Carl Yastrzemski has 7,079. You see, all three categories added up. Who's number 1? You should know. Come on. Number 6, Willie Mays. Over 3,200 hits, very good. Over 2,000 runs scored, excellent, and over 1,900 RBI. That's Willie Mays. He breaks 7,248 total. 6. You're gonna be surprised. The Babe Ruth. He doesn't come in at number 1 as far as the three totals. He comes in at number 6 on the list. No, number 5 on the list. My apologies. Babe Ruth, number 5. 3 totals. Why? Well, over 2,800 hits. That's probably why. But he had 2,174 runs scored and over 2,200 RBIs. If he had broken more hits, he would be higher. But Babe Ruth, number 5, 7,260. Who beats him? Cap Anson. Why? He played 27 years in the league, started off in the 1880s. Cap Anson, over 3,400 hits, 600 more than Ruth. And he's close to 2,000 runs scored and 2,000 RBIs. So you see the hits puts him over and gives him 7,509. Who's number 3? Pete Rose. 4,256 hits. That's number 1. That really pushed him up. 2,165 runs scored. That is incredible. The thing that kept him a little lower was the RBIs, 1,314, but he becomes number 3 at 7,735. Pete Rose. Number 2, Henry Aaron. 3,771 hits. Incredible. 2,174 runs scored. Incredible. 2,297 RBIs, number 1. And he breaks 8,242. What was number 50 on the list? 5,524. And Henry Aaron has combined totals of 8,242. That is about 2,700 more than the number 50 person on the list as far as efficiency. But who's number 1? Who haven't I mentioned? If you're a baseball fanatic, you should know. Number one in all, as far as adding up these three individual categories: hits, runs scored, and RBIs for their career. Ty Cobb, 4,189 hits, 2,246 runs scored. But the key to Cobb is 1,938. So all three categories are outstanding. And that gives him a grand total of 8,373, which is 130 more than Aaron. Now, we know that Cobb, he played 24 years. Pete Rose played 24 years. Henry Aaron played 22 years. Who has the most at-bats? Pete Rose, 14,000 at-bats. Aaron, he had 12,000 at-bats. Yastrzemski, 12,000. Ripken, 11,500. Cobb, 11,400. Eddie Murray, 11,300. Jeter, 11,100. Yount, 11,000. Winfield, 11,000. Stan Musial, close to 11,000. Henderson and Mays and Molitor are all close to 11,000. Brooks Robinson. You know that Ruth only had 8,300 at bats, and Gehrig only had 8,000 at bats. Hornsby had 8,000 at bats too, and Gwynn only had 9,000 at bats. So you see, as far as efficiency, according to my metric, who is the best all-around player of all time? It's hard to determine. You know why? If Cobb and Rose and Aaron, Rose 14,000 at bats, and Babe Ruth, 8,300 at bats. That means that Pete Rose had 6,000 more at bats than Babe Ruth. What would Ruth do if he had the same amount of bats as Pete Rose? Cobb had 11,400. What would he do if he had the same amount of bats as Pete Rose? Pete Rose comes in at number 3 on the list because he played a long time and a lot of bats. Let me just recap, okay? Just for the video's sake. I know I was a little discombobulated there in a little bit because I wanted to make sure I had the right number of order. I think I've got it. Okay. Ernie Banks. Ernie Banks is number 50 on the list. Lou Brock, Wade Boggs, Johnny Damon, Sam Rice, Billy Williams, Mickey Mantle, Jim Thome, Frank Thomas, Tony Perez, Frankie Frisch, Tony Gwynn. That's number 50 through number 39. Roberto Clemente, Andrew Dawson, Harold Baines, Reggie Jackson, Sam Crawford, Chipper Jones, Lou Gehringer, Craig Biggio, Paul Wainer, Roger Hornsby, Jack Beckley, Robin Yount. Al Kaline, Al Simmons, Ken Griffey Jr., Ted Williams, Jimmy Fox, George Brett, Nap Lajoie, Paul Molitor, Andre Beltre, Eddie Collins, Ricky Henderson, Cal Ripken, Frank Robinson, Mel Ott, Lou Gehrig, Dave Winfield. And then the top 10. Number 10, Derek Jeter. 9, Eddie Murray. 8, Tris Speaker. 7, Carl Yastrzemski. 6, Willie Mays. 5, Babe Ruth. 4, Cap Hansen. 3, Pete Rose, 2, Henry Aaron, and 1, Ty Cobb. Now, these are all players, all this list are players who have finished their career. I did not include players who are presently playing, and I did not include players who took performing enhancing drugs, steroids. I like those players. For example, Barry Bonds would be in the 7,000s. Albert Pujols, he's playing still. He's in the 7,000 if you add all three categories. Alex Rodriguez, he's in the 7,000s. But I question Alex and Barry for their stats because they admitted to performing enhancing drugs, which puts their stats in question. They're not in the Hall of Fame. And I would put them in the Hall of Fame. Pete Rose not in the Hall of Fame, and I'd put him in the Hall of Fame. But I didn't include those players on this list. These are the players I looked up. Now, do we know that their stats are legitimate? I'd say 99% legitimate. It could be that 1% that we don't know if they took any drugs throughout all the years that helped them perform. But we do know that Barry Bonds and Alex Rodriguez and Rafael Palmeiro is another one, and Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire. We do know that their stats are in question. But all those players, I'd put them in the Hall of Fame because they know how to play. They know how to hit, and they have the stats. But the stats, as far as ranking, are in question. Following me? Okay. So what's the point of my metric? The point of the metric is, who is the player who performed in their career better than other players? Now, some of these players didn't play as long, but I proved to you the point that if Pete Rose and Ty Cobb and Babe Ruth, who else? I proved to you my analysis that if Pete Rose, Ty Cobb, Roger Hornsby, Henry Aaron, Ted Williams, Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Shoeless Joe Jackson, Tris Speaker, Stan Musial, Willie Mays, and Carl Yastrzemski, and Honus Wagner and Tony Gwynn, if they all played the same amount of game, who comes out number 1? Ty Cobb comes out number 1. And Shoeless Joe Jackson comes out at number 2. And Roger Hornsby, 3. Tris Speaker, 4. Lou Gehrig, 5. Ted Williams, 6. 7, Henry Aaron. 8, Babe Ruth. Number 9, Stan Musial. 10, Willie Mays. Honus Wagner. And then Tony Gwynn, as far as what their career would have ended up with if they played the same amount of games. What do you think of my analysis? And how about the 3 categories that I added up? Hits, runs, and RBIs. It's hard to determine because you've got so many factors in the game of baseball. You know, you have injuries through the years. They're performing great, then they get injured, then they don't perform as well. Or the other factor is some guys play longer in games and they get pitched to, or other guys play a long career, but they don't get pitched to as the same as the other player. Follow me? You think they pitched Ty Cobb the same way they pitched Babe Ruth? And how about Pete Rose? The most games and most at-bats, but his percentage, he has the most at-bats and the most hits, but he's at 1.19 hits per game, where Cobb is at 1.38 hits per game. Hornsby, 1.29. Aaron, 1.24, good. Gehrig, 1.24. Tris Speaker 1.26, but Shoeless Joe Jackson 1.33. Some of the other guys are like 1.19, Mays 1.09, Yaz 1.03, Gwynn about 1.1, 1.2, 1.20. All right. I think that's my metric. I'm going to call it a metrics video. You can agree or disagree. If you have any suggestions, what other factors can you determine to see who's the best ball player of all time? Or who performed the best? I'll just call this the performing video. We know that Babe Ruth is I'd say the greatest baseball player of all time. Why? 8,000 at bats, and he accumulates all the stats. And I believe we have 16 and a half years of his stats, because the first 4 years he was a pitcher, and then the last year he didn't. He had a poor season his last year, and then during the middle of his career he played half a season. So that's why I'm saying 16 and a half years of stats. And he accumulates 2,800 hits, 342 lifetime batting average, 714 home runs, and over 2,200 RBIs. Ty Cobb plays 24 years, and he accumulates a 366 batting average. So, greatest baseball player is Babe Ruth. The greatest hitter of all time has to be Ty Cobb. I just proved it. According to his metric, 1.38 hits per game. That's the highest. And if he plays 3,562 games, he ends up with 4,918 hits. So here's how I look at it as far as baseball players. Look at the stats. Look how many games they played. Look at the longevity. Look at their performance. Look at the batting average. Look at the hits, the runs scored, and the RBIs. So, you want to know who I think on my baseball list? Well, I did another video, the top 50 baseball players of all time. And I did the top 50 pitchers of all time. But according to this metric, how can I determine, according to their performance, who legitimately is the all-around best baseball player of all time? Do you consider the fact that Cobb had the best average and that according to the hits, runs, and RBIs totaled up, he comes in at number 1 at 8,373? Do you consider him the best of all time? But you got to consider that Babe Ruth had 3,500 less at-bats than Ty Cobb. He gets those extra at-bats and he plays the same amount of games as Cobb. Where does he end up? Well, he was number 5 on the list. But according to my analysis, Ruth, okay, he played 2,503 games. Cobb played 500 more games. So if they play the same amount of games, does Ruth pass Cobb in hits? No. Because Cobb has 1.38 hits per game, where Ruth has 1.14 hits per game. Why? My analysis is it must be the walks. Ruth had 2,062 walks, where Cobb had 1,200 walks. So who do you determine, Ruth or Cobb is better? Here's how I put it. Ruth is the best slugger and home run hitter of all time, his ratio. 8,000 at-bats, 714 home runs. Whereas Henry Aaron had 12,000 at-bats, 4,000 more at-bats, and yet he had 755 home runs, so only 41 more home runs with 4,000 more at-bats. So you got to say that Babe Ruth is the best home run hitter slugger of all time and would be considered the greatest baseball player of all time. The best hitter of all time, according to the stats, is Ty Cobb. 366 lifetime, 12 batting titles. Okay. As the best consistent ball player of all time, Henry Aaron. He comes in at number 2. I'm going to say that Pete Rose is the best hustle ball player of all time, the grittiest and the toughest ball player of all time. You thought Ty Cobb was tough. Pete Rose on the bases, look out for him. And okay, are you following me? Ruth, home runs. Cobb, the hits. Aaron, the consistency. Pete Rose, the hustle. I got to put in Roger Hornsby because he's got 358 lifetime batting average. Consistent ball player. Ted Williams, dynamic ball player of all time. Tony Gwynn did not strike out in 20 years, did not strike out more than 500 times in his career. I believe it was 434 times he struck out in 20 years. Whew. All right. So as far as baseball, if you want to rank them, you got to consider all the metrics, and you got to consider a lot of factors in baseball. Okay? My list, Babe Ruth, 1. Ty Cobb, 2. Henry Aaron, 3. 4, Willie Mays. 5, Roger Hornsby. 6, Ted Williams. 7, Lou Gehrig. 8, Stan Musial. 9, Honus Wagner. 10, Tony Gwynn. And then you can go all the way through and you can say, well, you may argue with me, what about Yastrzemski? What about Willie Mays? Did I put Willie Mays in? Yeah, I put Willie Mays in there. I'll do it again. Ruth, Cobb, Aaron, Mays, Hornsby. Okay. Williams, Gehrig. Who's after Gehrig? Stan Musial. Then Wagner and Gwynn. Okay? I got it. Gwynn, Wagner, Musial, Gehrig, Williams. I should go the other way, right? See, these lists are hard to do. Let's just do it again. I'll write it down. So you guys want to know, right? Ruth, number 1. Cobb, number 2. Aaron, number 3. Mays, number 4. 5, Hornsby. 6, Williams. 7, Gehrig. 8, Musial. 9, Wagner. 10, Gwynn. Well, you may say, what about Joe DiMaggio? Only played 12 years. What about Jackie Robinson? Only played 10 years. Kirby Puckett, 12 years. What about Yastrzemski? Top 20. Tris Speaker. What about Mel Ott, Frank Robinson, Cal Ripken, Nap Lajoie, George Brett, Jimmy Fox? What about all these guys? They're good. But if you add the metrics, here's what I came out with, okay? If you're confused by the video, watch it again and take notes. But I had fun with the metrics, and that's what I came up with. Maybe I'll do another video and analyze it a little bit better for baseball. What a game. National pastime, right? I want to thank you all for watching. Thanks for bearing with me. The top 50 metrics, Ken Artizone, and I'm out.